Chapter 421. Exchange Program 6. The morning after her breakthrough with the Infinite Horizon technique, Ciola found herself waiting at the east entrance of Starcrest Academy. The sun had just begun its ascent, painting the sky in hues of amber and gold that reflected off the polished stone of the Academy's towering spires. She stood with perfect posture, hands clasped behind her back, golden eyes scanning the path for any sign of Arthur. She had spoken with her father last night about her progress. The conversation had been brief but momentous. Moyong Jong rarely showed emotion, but the slight widening of his eyes had spoken volumes. A grade 6 art for their family. The implications were profound, and they both knew it. "You're early." Ciola turned to find Arthur approaching, his movements silent and efficient as always. He wore a simple training outfit, but there was nothing simple about the way he carried himself, like a blade sheathed but ever ready. "So are you," she replied evenly. "I thought I'd show you Starcrest properly. You helped me yesterday. Consider this repayment." Arthur smiled, one of those small, measured expressions that never quite reached his eyes. "I hardly did anything. You showed me what was possible," Ciola said with uncharacteristic directness. "That's not nothing." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. Rather, it carried a sense of mutual assessment, two swordmasters recognizing something in each other that few others would understand. "Well then," Arthur said at last, "lead on." Starcrest Academy sprawled across the eastern mountain range like a city unto itself, ancient structures blending seamlessly with modern architecture. Unlike Mythos Academy with its uniform design philosophy, Starcrest had evolved organically over centuries, each generation adding its mark while preserving what came before. "The Academy is divided into 7 major sections," Ciola explained as they walked along a stone pathway flanked by cherry trees. "Most visitors only see the central campus and mistake it for the entirety of Starcrest. And the real Starcrest lies deeper," Arthur observed. Ciola nodded, pleased by his perception. "The central campus houses administrative facilities and general education classrooms. Beyond that," she gestured toward a series of interconnected buildings with distinctly traditional Eastern architecture, "lie the specialized training grounds." They passed through an archway adorned with carvings of swords and spears, entering a vast courtyard where dozens of students practiced various martial forms. Unlike at Mythos, where training was often conducted with a certain performative flair, here the atmosphere was intensely focused. No wasted movements, no flashy displays, just the disciplined pursuit of mastery. "Impressive," Arthur commented, his eyes tracking a young man moving through a complex series of strikes. "Your standard curriculum is more advanced than Mythos's specialized tracks." "The East values foundation," Ciola replied simply. "Without roots, a tree cannot grow tall." They continued walking, passing through gardens where students meditated among carefully arranged stones and flowing water. Ciola explained how mental cultivation was considered equally important to physical training at Starcrest, a philosophy that had endured since the Academy's founding. "And this," she said as they arrived at an expansive pavilion built on the edge of a cliff, "is where elemental arts are practiced." The pavilion offered a breathtaking view of the mountains and the valley below. Students stood at various points along its edge, channeling mana into elemental manifestations that dissipated harmlessly into the open air. "Gives new meaning to throwing fire into the void," Arthur remarked with a hint of amusement. "Safety first," Ciola replied, the ghost of a smile on her lips. "We had an incident 50 years ago when 2 fire users decided to duel in the central courtyard. 3 buildings needed to be rebuilt." Arthur's eyebrow raised slightly. "Only 3. The architect designed Starcrest with student mishaps in mind," Ciola said. "Most of the structures can withstand significant damage." They paused to watch a young woman manipulating water into intricate shapes, her concentration evident in the furrow of her brow. The water flowed in patterns reminiscent of calligraphy, forming characters that dissolved back into formlessness. "Water calligraphy," Ciola explained, "an ancient art adapted for mana practice. It teaches precision and control." "Beautiful," Arthur said, studying the technique with evident interest. And practical. No wasted resources, no permanent consequences for mistakes. Siola nodded. That's the essence of Eastern training philosophy. Practice should be sustainable, repeatable, and deliberate. As they continued their tour, Siola led Arthur to a section of the academy few outsiders ever saw. The historical archives housed in a building that predated the academy itself. This was once a temple, she explained as they entered the stone structure. Inside, the air was cool and still, scented with age and the subtle tang of preservation enchantments. Scrolls and books lined the walls, some displayed in glass cases, others stacked neatly on shelves that reached to the ceiling. The history of mana cultivation in the East, Arthur said, his voice appropriately hushed for their surroundings. Yes, some of these records date back to the first appearance of mana in our world. Siola moved to a particular case, gesturing to a scroll contained within. This documents the founding of the 5 great families. Arthur leaned closer, examining the ancient text with evident interest. Your family's history is here? The official version, Siola replied, a subtle inflection suggesting there might be more to the story. Arthur caught the nuance immediately. And the unofficial version? Siola considered him for a moment, weighing something in her mind. Then, with a slight nod of decision, she led him deeper into the archives, to a small alcove hidden behind a row of bookshelves. The first Moyong wasn't born to power, she said quietly, withdrawing a slender volume bound in faded blue cloth. He was a wanderer who found a sword abandoned on a battlefield, a sword that spoke to him. She opened the book carefully, revealing illustrations of a man holding a blade that seemed to shimmer with its own light. A sentient artifact? Arthur asked, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps. The accounts differ. Siola turned a page, revealing more illustrations. What we know is that he learned from the sword, and from that learning came our family's first techniques. Is the sword still in your family's possession? Siola's expression grew solemn. It was lost during the Blood Moon War 3 centuries ago. The search for it continues. Arthur nodded, understanding the weight such an artifact would carry for her family. Thank you for sharing this with me. Knowledge shared is knowledge strengthened, she replied, carefully returning the book to its place. Besides, you've given me something far more valuable. As they left the archives, the morning had fully blossomed into day. Students moved between buildings with purpose, the academy alive with activity. Siola led Arthur to a secluded garden where a small stream wound between carefully placed stones. This is where I come to think, she said, settling onto a bench beneath a maple tree. The sound of water helps clear the mind. Arthur sat beside her, his posture relaxed yet alert, a warrior even in repose. You've built something remarkable here, he said, his gaze taking in the academy grounds visible from their vantage point. Not me, Siola corrected. Generations before us. We're merely adding our thread to the tapestry. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the gentle murmur of the stream. May I ask you something? Siola said finally. Arthur turned to her, his azure eyes attentive. Of course. Your art, the hollow eclipse technique. It's not just technique, is it? There's emotion behind it. Arthur's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or respect for her insight. You're right, he said after a moment. The most powerful techniques aren't just about form or function. They're about channeling something deeper. What does hollow eclipse channel, then? Arthur was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Hunger, he said finally. The memory of starvation, not just physical but spiritual. The hollow feeling of wanting something beyond reach. Siola nodded slowly, understanding in her golden eyes. That explains its power. And its name. And your infinite horizon? Arthur asked. What does it channel? Freedom, Siola replied without hesitation. The yearning to break beyond limitations, to see what lies past the edge of the known world. A smile touched Arthur's lips, a genuine one this time. That suits you. Does it? Seola looked surprised. You've always seemed contained, Arthur observed, like someone holding themselves in check. But yesterday, when you were working on the technique, that containment fell away. You looked liberated. Seola considered this, turning his words over in her mind. The Moyong family has always valued discipline above all else, she said finally. Freedom isn't something we often discuss. Perhaps that's why your art needed it, Arthur suggested. Balance requires opposing forces. Seola nodded, thoughtful. I'll remember that as I develop the remaining movements. As the sun climbed higher, they continued their conversation, moving from martial philosophy to more practical matters. Training regimens, the differences between Eastern and Western approaches to mana cultivation, the particular challenges of the exchange program. Your father seemed pleased with your progress, Arthur noted. As pleased as he ever shows, Seola replied with a hint of dry humor. But yes, elevating our family's art to grade 6 has implications. Political ones, Arthur said, not a question. Everything in the East is political, Seola confirmed. Especially power. With a grade 6 art, we stand more firmly alongside the Kagu family and Mount Hua sect. Will this change things for you personally? Seola considered this. More responsibilities, certainly. Greater expectations. She paused, looking out over the academy grounds. But also more freedom, in a way. Having proven myself capable of this achievement, my father may be less directive about my future. The burden of talent, Arthur said with a knowing nod. One you understand well, Seola observed. Arthur didn't deny it. We're given gifts for a reason, he said instead. The question is whether we choose our purpose, or it chooses us. And which was it for you? Seola asked, her golden eyes studying him intently. Arthur's smile held something both sad and resolute. Let's just say it was a mutual agreement. Before Seola could pursue this cryptic answer, the distant sound of a bell reached them, a signal that morning classes were about to begin. I should go, Seola said, rising from the bench. I need to study. Arthur stood as well, inclining his head in a slight bow. Thank you for the tour. And the conversation. Thank you for helping me find the missing piece, she replied, returning the gesture with equal formality. Chapter 422. Windmere 1. After a week of training in Starcrest Academy, we were divided into groups of 3 and given missions in different towns and cities all over the eastern continent. I was grouped with Ava Pang and Cecilia Slatemark. Serial murders in a small town, huh? I scrolled through the mission details on my phone. Sounds fun, Cecilia murmured, her head resting comfortably on my shoulder. She'd been using me as a pillow for the past hour of our drive. Not that I was complaining. The familiar scent of her perfume, jasmine with a hint of something darker, was distracting in the best possible way. It's a small town, Ava said from across the self-driving car, tucking a strand of black hair behind her ear. Her posture was perfect as always, hands folded neatly in her lap, looking more like she was headed to a business meeting than a murder investigation. The mayor is the strongest person there, and he's only white rank. But a 6-star adventurer took this mission and... She paused, her dark eyes meeting mine. Didn't make it back. I whistled. That changes things. Ava muttered, eyes back on her tablet. We all should be concerned. The eastern continent isn't like the west. Towns here operate under different rules. She wasn't wrong. Unlike the unified government structure of the central continent where I'd grown up, the East was ruled by a patchwork of powerful families and martial sections. Towns like Windmere existed in the spaces between these territories, often neglected and left to fend for themselves. That's why adventurers were crucial, taking on jobs too dangerous for locals but not important enough for the major families to bother with. I still don't see why they'd send all 3 of us, I said, sliding my phone into my pocket. Even with a dead adventurer, this seems like overkill. No offense to either of you. Maybe they just wanted to give us some quality time together. Cecilia smiled, pressing herself closer against my side. Her fingers traced idle patterns on my thigh, a touch too high to be entirely innocent. It has been a whole week since we've had a proper mission together. Ava cleared her throat pointedly. The Academy is testing our teamwork. Integration rankers like us are rare, especially among students. They want to see how we function as a unit. Boring explanation, Cecilia sighed, but withdrew her wandering hand. But probably accurate. The car slowed as we approached a checkpoint at the edge of Windmere. 2 guards in mismatched uniforms stood beside a makeshift barrier, looking nervous even from a distance. "Showtime," I muttered, rolling down the window as we stopped. "ID check, gentlemen." The first guard approached cautiously, taking our Academy identification cards with visibly trembling hands. His eyes widened progressively as he read each one. "Slate mark Empire Princess?" he stammered when he reached Cecilia's. "That's me," Cecilia replied with a smile that could cut glass. "Problem. And no, Your Highness." He practically threw the IDs back at us. "And you must be the Peng family heiress?" he added, looking at Ava with equal trepidation. Ava simply nodded, her expression neutral. "Welcome to Windmere," the second guard blurted, hurriedly raising the barrier. "The mayor will be honored to receive such distinguished guests." As we drove through, I watched the guards in the rearview mirror. The moment they thought we were out of earshot, one grabbed a phone and started making a call. "Well, there goes our low profile," I said. Cecilia stretched beside me like a cat, completely unconcerned. Did we ever have one? 2 of the most prominent families in the Eastern continent plus you, Mr. Arthur Nightingale. "Focus," Ava interrupted. "We're approaching the town center." Windmere looked like dozens of other small eastern towns I'd seen. Narrow streets lined with a mix of traditional architecture and newer, cheaply constructed buildings. People moved about their business, but something felt off. They walked with their heads down, conversations stopping whenever our car passed by. "Friendly place," Cecilia remarked. "Let's get something to eat first," I suggested as we pulled up to a small hotel in the town center. "I'm starving, and we can start asking questions." 20 minutes later, we were seated in a dim-sum restaurant across the street. The place was half-empty despite it being lunchtime, and our arrival had caused a noticeable hush in the already quiet atmosphere. "This town feels weird," I muttered, reaching for a steamed bun. "Dreadful," Cecilia agreed, somehow making the act of eating look elegant. She slipped her arm through mine, pressing closer than necessary. "Good thing I have you to protect me. I'm pretty sure you could level this whole place if you wanted to," I reminded her. Cecilia might play the pampered princess, but I knew her strength. She batted her eyelashes at me. "But it's so much more fun to have you do it." Ava ignored our banter, focused on her tea and the mission brief displayed on her tablet. 11 victims in the past 3 months. All men. She swiped through crime scene photos that would have made most people lose their appetite. No obvious connection between them except gender. "The last adventurer thought they were being chosen through gambling dens," Cecilia said, recalling the report. "That's what his final message said." I nodded. "But he was wrong." "Oh," Ava raised an eyebrow. "Do tell." "It's not the gambling dens," I explained, pulling out my phone to show them the data visualization I'd created. "It's the brothels." Ava's expression twisted in distaste. "What makes you so sure?" "Look at the Eastern continent, especially rural areas like this," I said. "It's conservative, traditional values, modest dress, especially for women." I nodded toward Ava and Cecilia. "Did you notice how men were staring at you both when we arrived? It's not just because you're beautiful, but also because of your clothes." Cecilia was wearing a form-fitting dress that would be considered tame in the capital but was practically scandalous here. Even Ava, in her more reserved blouse and pants, was dressed more modernly than the local women in their traditional attire. "So it's lust, then?" Cecilia murmured, leaning close enough that her breath tickled my ear. "Do you also like these freeing clothes on me, Arthur?" I almost choked on my tea. "I'm trying to solve murders here, Cecilia." You can do both, she purred, her hand finding my thigh under the table. That seems strange, Ava said, frowning at my theory. Her traditional Eastern upbringing was showing. Are men really like that? They can be, I said, gently removing Cecilia's wandering hand. Especially in places where people are kept under strict control. Someone's exploiting that tension, creating a brothel system that's being used to target victims. I think there's more to it, Cecilia said, suddenly serious. Conservative attitudes alone wouldn't drive men to that extreme. I nodded. Agreed. There's something deeper we're not seeing yet. A waiter approached our table, nearly spilling tea in his nervousness. Forgive me, honored guests, but the mayor has extended an invitation for dinner this evening. He wishes to discuss your investigation. How thoughtful, Cecilia replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Please tell him we'd be delighted. After the waiter scurried away, I leaned forward. Well, that was fast. Too fast, Ava agreed. Those guards must have called ahead. It doesn't matter, I said. We need to talk to him anyway. But first, let's split up and see what the locals have to say. Meet back at the hotel in 3 hours. Cecilia pouted. Split up? But we just got here. She traced a finger down my arm. I was hoping we could check into our room first. Maybe rest a bit before we start working. The way she said rest made it clear that rest was the last thing on her mind. Ava stood abruptly, cheeks slightly flushed. I'll take the eastern section of town. You two can handle the west. She gathered her things with efficient movements. Try to actually accomplish something before dinner. As she walked away, Cecilia giggled. I think we embarrass her. You embarrass her, I corrected, but couldn't help smiling. Come on, we really do have work to do. Fine, she sighed dramatically, but her eyes were alert and focused. The playful girlfriend act dropped slightly, revealing the shrewd princess underneath. But you're making this up to me later. Deal, I promised, helping her to her feet. Let's see what secrets Windmere is hiding. We spent the afternoon questioning locals, but the results were unsettling. No matter what we asked, the conversation inevitably turned to praise for the mayor. He was a pillar of strength, the kindest man, a true protector of the town. Even when our questions had nothing to do with him, people found ways to mention his virtues. It was almost like they were following a script. By the time we regrouped at the hotel, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across Windmere's quiet streets. Ava was already waiting in the lobby, her expression troubled. Let me guess, I said as we approached. Everyone loves the mayor? She nodded grimly. It's unnatural. I've never seen such uniform adoration. Fear, Cecilia corrected, dropping onto an ornate couch. That's not love in their eyes. They're terrified. I sat beside her, thinking through what we'd learned, and what we hadn't. There's something very wrong in this town, and I bet our dinner host is at the center of it. As if on cue, a black car pulled up outside the hotel, clearly sent to transport us to the mayor's residence. Well then, Cecilia stood and smoothed her dress, a dangerous smile playing on her lips. Let's not keep him waiting. Chapter 423. Windmere, 2. The mayor's car was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to Windmere's otherwise modest appearance. Beside me, Cecilia had slipped back into princess mode, her posture perfect, face a mask of polite interest. Only the slight pressure of her thigh against mine betrayed her tension. This feels like a trap, Luna whispered in my mind, her Chilean presence stirring restlessly. Everything in this town feels like a trap, responded another voice, deeper and colder than Luna's melodic tones. Erebus, my lich, rarely spoke unless it involved death, his domain of expertise. You sense something? I asked him silently. Death lingers in this town, Erebus replied, his ancient voice sending a chill down my spine despite our years together. Not just recent. Years of it layer upon layer, like sediment on a riverbed. Great. Exactly what I needed to hear before dinner. We're approaching the mayor's residence, Ava announced, peering through the tinted windows. And it's not what I expected. She wasn't kidding. As we rounded a corner, the modest buildings of Windermere fell away, revealing a sprawling estate that would have looked more at home in the capital than in this backwater town. A high wall surrounded manicured gardens, and at the center stood a mansion that practically screamed wealth and power. "Well, someone's doing well for themselves," Cecilia murmured, eyebrow raised. "Public service must pay better in the East than I thought." The car pulled through ornate iron gates and followed a curved driveway to the front entrance, where a line of servants waited to greet us. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit stood at their center, his smile broad and welcoming. "That's our mayor," I guessed, noting the deference the others showed him. Quite the reception. The driver opened our door, and we stepped out into the cool evening air. Immediately, the mayor approached, bowing deeply. "Princess Cecilia of the Slatemark Empire, Lady Ava of the esteemed Pung family, and the renowned Arthur Nightingale," he greeted, his voice warm and practiced. "What an honor to welcome you to my humble home. I am Mayor Chun, at your service." Humble was the last word I'd used to describe this place, but I kept that thought to myself. "The honor is ours," Cecilia replied smoothly, every inch the diplomatic princess. "Thank you for your hospitality on such short notice. Please, follow me." Mayor Chun gestured toward the entrance. "Dinner is ready, and we have much to discuss about these terrible events plaguing our peaceful town." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than its exterior. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, priceless art on every wall. Servants materialized at each turn, offering drinks and leading us through a series of opulent rooms until we reached a dining hall that could have seated 40, though it was set for just the 4 of us. "Please make yourselves comfortable," the mayor said, indicating our places at one end of the long table. "I've had my chef prepare some local specialties." The food, when it arrived, was exquisite, far beyond what I'd expect from a small-town kitchen. Course after course appeared. Delicate dumplings filled with rare mushrooms, perfectly seared meats, vegetables carved into intricate shapes. Throughout the meal, Mayor Chun kept up a stream of pleasant conversation, skillfully avoiding any substantial discussion of the murders. "Forgive me for being direct," Ava finally said during a pause between courses, "but we're here on official business. What can you tell us about these killings?" The mayor's smile faltered slightly before returning. Of course. Business before pleasure. I admire that, Miss Pong." He dabbed his lips with a napkin. "The situation is troubling. 11 good men lost in 3 months. Each found drained of blood, with strange markings carved into their flesh." "Markings?" I prompted. That detail hadn't been in our briefing. "Yes, like some kind of ritual," he replied, his expression grave. "Our local doctor couldn't identify them. I had hoped the Adventurer Guild would send someone with knowledge of such things, but the first adventurer who took the case." He trailed off, shaking his head sadly. "He died," Cecilia finished bluntly. "Disappeared," the mayor corrected. "We never found his body. But given the circumstances," he sighed heavily, "we fear the worst." "Ask about the markings," Erebus urged. "I need to see them." "Do you have photographs of these markings?" I asked. The mayor nodded. "I prepared a file for you. You can take it when you leave." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "But I must warn you, this killer is unlike anything we've faced before. He strikes without warning, leaves no witnesses. My people are terrified." "And yet they speak so highly of you," Cecilia observed, her tone deceptively casual. "Everyone we talked to today couldn't praise you enough." Was that a flash of tension in the mayor's eyes? If so, it was gone in an instant, replaced by modest self-deprecation. "They're kind people," he said, "and in times of crisis they look to leadership. I've done my best to protect them, organizing patrols, implementing curfews. But I'm only a white ranker, against someone powerful enough to kill a 6-star adventurer." He spread his hands helplessly. "We'll need access to all your case files," I said, "and to speak with families of the victims." Of course, the mayor agreed readily. Whatever you need. My assistant will provide everything tomorrow morning. The rest of the dinner passed uneventfully. The mayor skillfully guided conversation to lighter topics, the history of Windermere, recent developments in the empire, even polite inquiries about our studies at the academy. By the time dessert arrived, I was more convinced than ever that Mayor Chun was hiding something behind his perfect host facade. As we prepared to leave, he handed me a thick folder. The case files, as promised, including the photographs. Thank you, I replied, weighing the folder in my hand. We'll be in touch tomorrow after we've reviewed these. The same silent driver returned us to our hotel. None of us spoke until we were safely inside the suite the mayor had arranged for us, a spacious accommodation with 2 bedrooms and a common area. Ava immediately began checking for listening devices while Cecilia collapsed dramatically onto a sofa. Well, that was enlightening, she said, kicking off her shoes. Our host is either the most generous public servant in the East or he's hiding something massive. Definitely the latter, I agreed, opening the folder. I spread the crime scene photos across the coffee table, and immediately wished I hadn't. The victims had been savagely mutilated, their bodies contorted in positions that no living person could achieve. And on each corpse, carved into the flesh with surgical precision, were symbols I didn't recognize. Blood magic, Erebus whispered, his voice suddenly intense. Ancient and forbidden. These aren't just murders, they're sacrifices. Red Chalice cult again? I thought. I relayed this information to the others. Ava's expression grew grim, while Cecilia moved closer to examine the photos. Sacrifices for what? She asked. Power, I replied, letting Erebus guide my understanding. Each symbol draws out and preserves the victim's life force. These people weren't just killed, they were harvested. By the mayor? Ava asked, finishing her sweep of the room. It seems clear. Too clear, I countered. He handed over these photos without hesitation. Either he's innocent or he's so confident we can't touch him that he doesn't care what we know, Cecilia finished. She leaned against me, all pretense of princess decorum gone now that we were alone. So what's our next move? I gathered the photos, my mind racing. We need to verify his story, talk to the families, see if their accounts match the official reports. And we need to check out that brothel theory, see if there's a connection between the victims. Split up again? Ava suggested. We can cover more ground. Cecilia immediately wrapped her arms around my waist. I'm with Arthur this time. No arguments. Ava didn't look surprised. Fine. I'll speak with the families. You two can investigate your brothel theory. Her tone made it clear what she thought of that plan. Be careful, I warned her. If the mayor is behind this, he'll be watching us. I can handle myself, she replied with quiet confidence. We'd all seen Ava fight. Her calm demeanor hid a terrifying efficiency in battle. We'll meet back here before dinner, I said. Compare notes. After Ava retired to her room, Cecilia pulled me toward the suite's second bedroom. Now that business is settled, she purred. I believe you owe me for making me sit through that tedious dinner. I laughed, following her into the room. The food was good at least. The company wasn't, she replied, pushing me onto the bed. All that fake concern and practiced charm. I wanted to stab him with my dinner knife. That would have been diplomatically challenging, I pointed out as she straddled my lap. Worth it? She whispered against my lips. Besides, you would have protected me. That's what boyfriends are for, right? Before I could answer, she kissed me deeply, effectively ending the conversation. But even as I lost myself in her embrace, part of my mind remained troubled. Erebus's warnings echoed in my thoughts, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial about Windermere and its smiling mayor. Morning came too quickly. Cecilia was still asleep when I slipped out of bed, drawn to the case files I'd left in the common area. I spread the photos out again, focusing on the symbols carved into each victim. You recognize these, don't you? I silently asked Erebus. The Lich admitted. They belong to a ritual older than me. a forbidden technique for drawing out and preserving life essence. But these are only fragments. The complete ritual would require many more sacrifices, arranged in a specific pattern. What's the end goal? I pressed. Power. Immortality. The usual pursuits of those who meddle with death. Erebus's tone was dismissive. But these markings are precise, professional. Whoever carved them knows exactly what they're doing. A sound from the doorway made me look up. Ava stood there, already dressed and ready for the day. "You're up early," she observed, joining me at the table. Her eyes narrowed at the photos. "Find anything new?" "Maybe," I said, organizing the photos chronologically. According to Erebus, these markings form part of a larger ritual. If we map the locations where the bodies were found, I pulled out a town map from the folder and began marking the discovery sites. As the pattern emerged, Ava's expression grew troubled. "It's a sigil," she said quietly, "centered on the mayor's mansion." "Exactly," I confirmed. "These murders aren't random. They're carefully planned, creating a massive array with the mayor's home at the focal point." "So he is behind it," Ava concluded. "Or someone's setting him up," I countered. "Either way, we need more information. Stick to the plan, you talk to the families, and Cecilia and I will check out the brothel angle." The door to the bedroom opened, and Cecilia emerged, wrapped in a silk robe. Her hair was tousled from sleep, but her eyes were alert and focused. "I heard talking," she said, moving to join us. "What did I miss?" I quickly brought her up to speed. She examined the map, frowning at the pattern we'd discovered. "So we're dealing with some kind of dark ritual," she summarized. "With the mayor's mansion at the center." She looked up at me, all trace of playfulness gone. "This just got a lot more dangerous, didn't it?" "Yeah," I agreed, thinking of the 6-star adventurer who hadn't returned. "But we still have the advantage of numbers and strength. As long as we stick together and watch each other's backs, we can handle this." Ava nodded firmly. "I'll meet you back here by sundown. If I'm not back by then, we'll come looking," I promised. "Same goes for us." As Ava left for her interviews, Cecilia disappeared to get dressed. I stood at the window, looking out over the seemingly peaceful town of Windmere. Somewhere beneath its quiet surface lurked a killer. Perhaps the mayor himself, perhaps someone else, harvesting lives for some dark purpose. Chapter 424. Windmere 3. Windmere looked different in daylight, less ominous, more pathetic. As Cecilia and I walked through the Eastern District, I couldn't help noticing the contrast between the townspeople's modest homes and the mayor's ostentatious mansion. Small gardens struggled for sunlight between tightly packed buildings. Children played in narrow alleys, their laughter cutting off abruptly when they spotted us. "They're scared of strangers," Cecilia observed, her fingers intertwined with mine. Despite the seriousness of our mission, she'd insisted on maintaining our couple facade. Not that I was complaining. Her hand felt warm against mine, a reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. "Not just strangers," I replied, watching a woman hurry inside as we approached, slamming her door shut. "They're scared of everything." According to our intel, the brothel operated out of a nondescript building near the edge of town. Finding it proved challenging. Nobody was willing to give us directions, and the few who acknowledged our questions quickly changed the subject to praise the mayor. "This is getting us nowhere," Cecilia sighed after yet another unproductive conversation. "Let's try something else." She released my hand and approached a group of young men loitering near a small convenience store. I watched in amusement as she transformed before my eyes, her posture softening, her expression becoming more vulnerable. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the picture of innocent confusion. "Excuse me," she called, her voice pitched higher than normal. "My boyfriend and I are a bit lost. We're looking for, entertainment." She blushed prettily. "Something adventurous, you know? For both of us." The men exchanged glances. One of them, emboldened by Cecilia's apparent interest, stepped forward. "Not much entertainment in Windmere," he said cautiously. But, if you're looking for something private, there's a place past the old factory. Red light above the door. Thanks, Cecilia beamed at him. You're a lifesaver. She rejoined me, her princess persona snapping back into place like armor. Men are so predictable, she murmured, taking my hand again. Always eager to help a damsel in distress, especially when they think it might lead to something interesting. You're terrifying, you know that? I told her admiringly. she agreed, looking pleased with herself. That's why you love me. We found the old factory easily enough. An abandoned building with boarded windows and faded warnings about trespassing. Beyond it stood a row of shabby two-story structures, most appearing vacant except for one with a dim red bulb hanging above its unmarked door. That's our place? I said, feeling Luna stir anxiously in my mind. What is it? Cecilia asked, noticing my expression. I explained. Something's not right about this place. She squeezed my hand. We knew that already. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I considered our options. I should go in alone. You'd attract too much attention. Not happening, she replied flatly. We stick together. Cecilia, I sighed. I need you to trust me on this. If I go in as a customer, I can ask questions without raising suspicion. If we go in together, everyone will clam up immediately. She frowned, clearly unhappy with my logic despite its soundness. Fine, she finally conceded. But I'm waiting right outside. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, I'm coming in. And Arthur, her eyes narrowed. Don't you dare enjoy yourself in there. I couldn't help laughing. I'm investigating ritual murders, not looking for a good time. Just making sure we're clear, she sniffed, but I caught her slight smile. Go on then. I'll be watching. With a quick kiss to reassure her, I approached the brothel alone. The door opened easily, revealing a dimly lit interior that smelled of cheap incense and cheaper liquor. Men sat scattered around small tables, none making eye contact with each other or acknowledging my entrance. A makeshift bar occupied one wall, tended by a middle-aged woman with sharp, watchful eyes. I made my way to the bar, ordering a whiskey I had no intention of drinking. The bartender poured without comment, but her gaze lingered on me a second too long. She'd seen my type before, not here for the advertised services. New in town? She finally asked, voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. Passing through, I replied, sliding payment across the counter. Heard this place was interesting. She snorted. Nothing's interesting in Windmere. I took a sip of the whiskey, suppressing a grimace at its quality. That's not what I heard. Heard there have been some issues lately. Her expression shuddered. Don't know what you're talking about. She's afraid, Luna observed in my mind. With good reason, Erebus added. Death has touched this place recently. I glanced toward the back of the room, where a few women stood in the shadows. One caught my attention. She held herself differently, back straight, eyes alert, while the others seemed to recede into the darkness. Something about her presence commanded attention. Our eyes met across the room. After a moment of silent assessment, she nodded slightly toward a hallway. Taking the invitation, I left my untouched drink and followed her up a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. The room she led me to was small and sparsely furnished, with a single bed against one wall and a chair in the corner. She closed the door and gestured to the chair, taking a seat herself as far from the bed as possible. I didn't come here for what you're thinking, I said, keeping my voice low. Her mouth quirked up slightly. Nobody ever says they did. Her voice was steady, with an unexpected depth to it. So what do you want? Information, I replied, leaning forward. About this town. About the mayor. About why people keep disappearing. Her face showed nothing, but I caught the slight tightening of her jaw. Who are you really? She asked, eyes narrowing. You're not from around here, that's obvious. My name is Arthur Nightingale. I'm from Mythos Academy. An adventurer? Skepticism colored her voice. The last one didn't make it out of Windmere. I'm aware, I said. That's partly why I'm here. She studied me for a long moment. You don't look like much, but there's something about you. She leaned forward slightly. You're not alone, are you? I saw you outside with that girl. My girlfriend, I said, which wasn't a lie. And we have another companion in town. 3 of you, she mused. Still won't be enough. Not against him. Against the mayor? She laughed. A harsh sound with no humor in it. The mayor is just a man. A cruel, powerful man, but still human. I'm talking about his enforcer. The one who handles problems. I pulled out a roll of cash and placed it on the small table between us. I want to know everything. And I pay well for useful information. She glanced at the money but didn't reach for it. Why should I risk my life talking to you? Because you want out, I guessed, watching her reaction. You're trapped here like everyone else. But you haven't given up hope yet. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that I had read her so well. She looked away, toward the single window with its grimy curtain. How long have you been in Windmere? I asked, keeping my voice gentle. 3 years, she replied after a moment. Came here looking for work. Couldn't afford to leave once I realized what kind of place it was. She turned back to me. They don't tell you the rules when you arrive. You figure them out after it's too late. What rules? She sighed, seeming to come to a decision. Fine. But understand this, Windmere has rules. Unspoken ones. Break them, and you don't get a second chance. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. The mayor, she began, voice dropping even lower, has this arrangement. Every man in town has to offer their wife to him for a night. Once a year. It's his sick way of showing who's really in charge. I kept my expression neutral despite the anger bubbling up. And everyone just goes along with this? What choice do they have? She asked bitterly. Those who refuse disappear. Their wives become widows overnight. Their children fatherless. And everyone knows why. Chapter 425. Windmere 4. How long has this been happening? Decades, from what I've heard. The mayor's been in power longer than anyone can remember. She leaned closer, lowering her voice further. These men who disappear, I said carefully. What happens to them exactly? She hesitated, conflict visible on her face. I shouldn't know this. Nobody's supposed to know. Another pause. But I saw something once. Something I wasn't meant to see. I waited, giving her time. Sometimes silence was the best prompt. It was about a year ago, she finally continued. A man refused the mayor's demand. Simon Wheeler, a shopkeeper. Good man, kind to everyone. He said no. Said he wouldn't let the mayor touch his wife. The next night, I was coming back late, taking a shortcut through the woods behind the mayor's mansion. She wrapped her arms around herself as if suddenly cold. I heard screaming, followed the sound to a clearing where I could see into one of the mansion's lower rooms through a window. Simon was there, strapped to some kind of table. The mayor was standing over him with a knife, carving things into his skin, symbols all over his body. Markings? Like a ritual? I prompted when she fell silent. She nodded. The mayor was chanting something. I couldn't hear the words, but she shuddered. The air felt wrong, heavy. And then there was someone else in the room, a tall man in dark clothes. He just appeared, like he stepped out of the shadows themselves. The mayor handed him the knife, and then she trailed off, unable or unwilling to describe what came next. This man in dark clothes, I said. The enforcer you mentioned earlier? Yes, she whispered. He's not normal. Moves too fast, too quiet. Some people say he's not even human anymore, that the mayor's rituals turned him into something else. And these rituals happen regularly? Every few months. Always after someone disappears. She met my gaze directly. 11 men in the past 3 months. More than usual. That matched our information exactly. Why the increase? Don't know, she admitted. But the mayor's been more on edge lately. Stricter about his rules. It's like he's rushing toward something. Completing a larger ritual, Erebus suggested. The individual sacrifices forming a pattern. Has anyone tried to fight back? I asked. Or escape? A few brave fools, she said, her voice tinged with something like respect. Men who tried to stand up to protect their families. They're all gone now.
No bodies, no goodbyes.
Just gone. She studied my face. The adventurer they sent before you, he asked the same questions. Started putting it together. Then one night, he went out and never came back. What happened to him? Same thing that happens to everyone who crosses the mayor, she said with finality. His pet monster got him. I absorbed this, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. This wasn't just corrupt leadership. This was systematic terror, maintained through violence and fear. And you? I asked. Why stay in a place like this? Someone smart enough to see what's happening should be smart enough to leave. She met my gaze, and for a moment, I saw through the carefully constructed walls to the person beneath. Someone who had once dreamed of something better. Where would I go? She said softly. This town traps you, makes you believe there's nowhere else. And after a while, you start to think maybe that's true. She hesitated. And there's something else. Something I haven't told anyone. I leaned forward. What is it? The mayor. He monitors everything. Every phone, every computer in Windmere. There are cameras hidden all over town. Nothing happens that he doesn't know about. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Including this conversation. A chill ran down my spine. He's watching us now? She nodded slightly. Probably. He has ways of knowing when people talk about him. That's why I never considered leaving. He'd know, and he'd send his enforcer after me. Then you need to get out now, I said, adding more money to the pile on the table. Take this. Go to Azure Grove City and find the Starcrest Academy office there. Tell them Arthur Nightingale sent you. They'll help you start over. She stared at the money, temptation warring with fear in her eyes. It's not that simple. Nobody just leaves Windmere. You will, I assured her. My girlfriend is waiting outside. She's an integration ranker like me. She can help get you safely out of town while I deal with the mayor's enforcer when he comes. And he will come, if you're right about being monitored. Hope flickered across her face, quickly suppressed. You don't understand what you're up against. I do, I replied calmly. An integration rank enforcer using forbidden death magic, serving a mayor who extends his life through ritual sacrifice. I stood up. It ends tonight. She rose as well, uncertainty in every movement. You really think you can stop him? After all this time? Yes, I said simply. But first, let's get you somewhere safe. As we prepared to leave, she caught my arm. Wait, there's one more thing you should know. Her voice was barely audible. The tattoo. What tattoo? The mayor has one on his wrist. A red sun with strange lines around it. The enforcer has the same mark. I've seen it when their sleeves pull up. The mark of the covenant, Erebus whispered in my mind, suddenly alert. A binding sigil that connects master and servant. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful for the information. That might be the key to stopping all this. We made our way downstairs, where the main room had grown quieter, an unnatural tension hanging in the air. The bartender's eyes widened when she saw us together, a warning in her gaze that I didn't need Luna's empathic senses to interpret. Outside, Cecilia straightened from where she'd been leaning against a wall, relief evident in her expression. It quickly shifted to curiosity when she saw I wasn't alone. Change of plans, I said before she could speak. We need to get her out of town immediately. The mayor will be sending someone for her. To her credit, Cecilia didn't waste time on questions. The hotel? She suggested. I shook my head. Too obvious. We need somewhere the mayor's people won't look. I know a place, the woman offered hesitantly. An abandoned hunting cabin in the woods west of town. It's where I go when I need space. Perfect, I decided. Cecilia, take her there and stay with her. I'll keep watch on the brothel. When the enforcer shows up, and he will, I'll deal with him. Cecilia's eyes narrowed. I don't like splitting up. Neither do I admitted. But I need to know she's safe, and there's no one I trust more than you to make that happen. The compliment softened her expression, though she still looked unhappy with the plan. Fine. But if you're not at the cabin by midnight, I'm coming looking for you. Deal, I agreed, knowing better than to argue. I gave her a quick kiss, then watched as the two women slipped away down a side alley. Once they were gone, I found a vantage point on a nearby rooftop, concealed from street level but with a clear view of the brothel's entrance. As the afternoon faded into evening, I settled in to wait, knowing it wouldn't be long before the mayor made his move. Be ready, Luna warned as the shadows lengthened. Someone approaches. Yes, Erebus confirmed, unusually cooperative with Luna. Death follows close behind him. I called Evolvus to my hand, the sword materializing from condensed mana. Its familiar weight was reassuring as I prepared for what was coming. The enforcer arrived just as twilight deepened into true night, a shadow separating from the darkness. Chapter 426. Windmere 5. The enforcer moved with practiced stealth, his power masked but palpable even at this distance. He was good, very good, at concealing his aura, but I could still sense the unmistakable resonance of an integration ranker. High integration rank, Luna observed in my mind. I activated Lucent Harmony, feeling the familiar sigils light up along my arms as perfect tranquility settled over me. All 9 elements of mana fell into perfect balance, enhancing my control and perception. With my high integration rank power flowing through me, I bent the ambient mana around my body, weaving it into a cloak that rendered me nearly invisible. The enforcer paused at the brothel entrance, head tilting slightly as if listening to some distant sound. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he'd sensed me despite my concealment. Then he pushed the door open and disappeared inside. I moved quickly, using the shadows as cover. Sliding through the door behind him, I followed at a distance as he made his way directly to the staircase, clearly familiar with the layout. The few remaining patrons inside studiously avoided looking in his direction, suddenly fascinated by their drinks or the floor, anything to avoid acknowledging the predator in their midst. At the top of the stairs, he paused outside the room where I'd spoken with the woman earlier. Drawing a blade that gleamed with an unnatural light, he kicked the door open in a single violent motion. I didn't waste time on subtlety. Launching forward, I brought Evolvus down in a sweeping strike aimed at disabling rather than killing. The enforcer sensed me at the last second, whirling with inhuman speed, his blade rising to meet mine. Our swords clashed with enough force to splinter the floorboards beneath us, the impact sending a shockwave through the narrow hallway. His eyes widened in shock. Clearly, he hadn't expected resistance, let alone from another integration ranker. Who? He began, but I didn't let him finish. I pressed my advantage, driving him back with a series of quick strikes. He was good, dangerously so, but I could tell I had the edge in both power and technique. He recovered quickly, adjusting his stance and counterattacking with a flurry of blows that would have overwhelmed a lesser opponent. I parried each strike, reading his movements with practiced ease, looking for an opening. I spun just in time to deflect a second attack. The enforcer had created a shadow clone while I was focused on his blade work. The duplicate dissolved under my counterstrike, but the distraction had given the real enforcer time to retreat down the stairs. I followed, staying close to prevent him from setting up another ambush. We burst into the main room of the brothel, now empty of customers. Only the bartender remained, pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror. "You're making a mistake," the enforcer said, his voice surprisingly normal for someone who radiated such menace. "The mayor protects this town. You have no idea what you're interfering with." "I know exactly what I'm interfering with," I replied, Evolvus glowing brighter as I channeled more power into it. "A serial killer who sacrifices innocent people to extend his life." The enforcer's expression darkened. "Sacrifices are necessary. The mayor's work ensures the safety of everyone. Everyone except the people he murders, I countered, launching another attack. Our battle intensified, blades clashing with enough force to shatter the nearby tables. The enforcer was fully engaged now, no longer holding back. His aura flared darkly, pushing against mine as we fought for dominance. I needed to end this quickly. Activating Mythic Body, I felt strength surge through my muscles as my physical form enhanced beyond normal limits. Soul Vision followed immediately, the world slowing around me as my perception sharpened to supernatural levels. The enforcer's eyes widened as he felt the shift in my power. "What are you?" I didn't bother answering. Instead, I channeled more power through Evolvus, the blade glowing with intensified energy as the Seraphim's embrace activated. Its ancient power sharpening my focus until I could read even the smallest twitch of his muscles, anticipating each move before he made it. The final exchange happened in the blink of an eye. He lunged forward with a desperate attack meant to impale me. I sidestepped, letting his blade pass harmlessly by my ribs, and brought Evolvus down in a perfect arc. The enforcer's sword shattered under the impact, and he crashed backward into the bar, sending bottles and glasses flying. He lay there, defeated, his dark aura flickering as he struggled to rise. I approached cautiously, Evolvus pointed at his throat. "Who are you working for?" He glared up at me, defiance warring with fear in his eyes. "You think the mayor is the real power here? He's just a servant, like me." "A servant to whom?" He laughed, a ragged sound that ended in a cough. "You'll find out soon enough. The ritual is almost complete." "What ritual?" I demanded, pushing the tip of Evolvus closer to his throat. "The one that's killing innocent people?" "Innocent." He spat the word. "Their fuel. Nothing more." Disgust rose in my throat. "For what purpose?" "You're too late to stop it," he said. "The mayor has everything he needs now. The final sacrifice happens tonight. The mayor's mansion. It had to be. I needed to get to Cecilia and Ava immediately. As I shifted my weight to step back, the enforcer made his move. With a surge of desperate energy, he slashed upward with a hidden dagger. I dodged, but not quite fast enough. The blade scored a shallow cut across my forearm. In that moment I made my decision. This man had helped murder countless innocents. If he escaped, he would only continue serving his master. There would be more death, more suffering. With cold clarity, I drove Evolvus down through his chest. The blade pierced through dark armor, flesh, and bone with a sickening crunch. The enforcer's eyes widened, not in pain but in surprise, as if he hadn't believed I was capable of delivering the killing blow. "You don't understand what you've done," he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "He will come for you now." "Let him try," I replied, twisting the blade. The enforcer's body convulsed once, then went still. As the life faded from his eyes, I thought I saw something else there. Not fear or anger, but a fleeting moment of relief. As if death was a release he had been denied for too long. I withdrew Evolvus, watching as the enforcer's body slumped to the floor. Black blood pooled beneath him, hissing where it touched the wooden boards. The smell of it was wrong, metallic but also sulfurous, like something that had been corrupted from the inside out. The bartender remained pressed against the wall, trembling. "You killed him," she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and terror. "No one's ever. He was supposed to be untouchable." "Not anymore," I told her, wiping Evolvus clean before sheathing it. "Get out of town tonight if you can. Things are about to get dangerous." She nodded quickly, then fled through the back door without another word. I knelt beside the enforcer's body, searching for anything that might give me more information. In his pocket, I found a small metallic object, a key, etched with symbols that matched the ones I'd seen carved into the victims' bodies. I pocketed it, suspecting it might prove useful. "We need to move quickly," Erebus urged. "The ritual won't wait." I needed to find Cecilia and Ava immediately. Now that I'd killed the mayor's enforcer, there was no telling how he would respond. If the ritual was happening tonight, we needed to stop it before it was complete. I left the brothel through the front door, not bothering with stealth anymore. The streets of Windmere were deserted, as if the town itself was holding its breath. In the distance, I could see the mayor's mansion on the hill, windows glowing with an unnatural light. "Something's happening there tonight," Luna murmured. "Look at the guards." The mansion was surrounded by more security than I'd seen during our dinner visit. Men in dark uniforms patrolled the perimeter, and through the windows, I could see unusual activity. Servants rushing about, carrying strange objects I couldn't quite make out. "Ritual preparations," Erebus confirmed. "The pattern is nearly complete." I turned away, moving quickly toward the western woods where Cecilia and the woman were hiding. I needed to gather our team and formulate a plan before the mayor could complete whatever dark ceremony he was preparing. The hunting cabin was well hidden, nestled in a small clearing 2 miles from town. Without Luna's enhanced senses, I might have missed it entirely. A warm light glowed from its single window, and as I approached, the door opened to reveal Cecilia, Evolvus already in her hand. "Arthur." Relief washed over her face as she recognized me. She lowered her sword and pulled me inside, closing the door behind us. "What happened?" "You're bleeding." "Just a scratch," I assured her, glancing around the cabin's simple interior. The woman from the brothel sat at a small table, while to my surprise, Ava occupied a chair by the fireplace. "Ava? How did you find this place?" "Cecilia sent me a message," she explained. "After what I discovered today, I thought it best we regroup." "What did you find?" I asked, sitting down heavily on a wooden stool. The adrenaline of the fight was wearing off, leaving me aware of various minor injuries. Chapter 427. Windmere 6. The families of the victims all told the same story, Ava said, her expression grim. Their husbands stood up to the mayor in some way, refused his arrangement, questioned his authority, or tried to leave town. All disappeared without a trace. "No bodies were ever found," I noted, connecting this to what the woman had told me. "Because they're used in the ritual," Ava confirmed. "I spoke with an elderly man who's lived here his whole life. He showed me a journal his grandfather kept. Records of disappearances going back nearly 70 years, all following the same pattern." 70 years? Cecilia looked shocked. "The same ritual for that long?" "The journal mentioned that each mayor of Windmere has continued the tradition," Ava explained, her finger tracing lines in the old leather-bound book she'd brought with her. "Power passing from one to the next, along with the responsibility of maintaining what they call the barrier." "Barrier against what?" I asked, my interest piqued. Ava shook her head. "The journal doesn't say specifically, just vague references to keeping it contained and preventing the awakening. And now he's preparing for something big," I added, quickly filling them in on my confrontation with the enforcer and what I'd seen at the mansion. "He called it the awakening and mentioned a final sacrifice happening tonight." I placed the key I'd taken from the enforcer on the table. "I found this on his body. It might be important." The woman from the brothel made a small sound of distress when she saw it. I've seen that before. The mayor wears it around his neck when he performs the rituals." She reached out hesitantly, fingers stopping just short of touching the key. "It opens the chamber beneath the mansion. The ritual chamber. I only saw it once, through the window. The walls were covered in symbols, like the ones carved on the victims." "Then it's too late," I said grimly. "If the ritual is already beginning." "It's never too late," Cecilia replied firmly, placing her hand over mine. Her touch was warm, grounding. 3 integration rankers should be more than enough to stop one white rank mayor, even without his enforcer. "You don't understand," the woman insisted. "The enforcer wasn't his only protection. There are others, creatures he's created through his rituals. I've seen them sometimes at night, patrolling the woods around his mansion." "What kind of creatures?" Ava asked, leaning forward. The woman's eyes darted nervously to the cabin's windows, as if afraid of being overheard. "They look almost human, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. Their movements are jerky, like puppets. And their eyes. She shuddered. No light in them at all. Zombies, Erebus whispered in my mind, his ancient voice unusually grave. I remembered encountering them in Vrindal City when we were attacked by the Umbervale Covenant. Did this mean they were responsible for this? But this was the Eastern continent. Cecilia's expression hardened as she deduced they were zombies as well, while Ava looked thoughtful, analyzing this new information. We didn't sense anything unusual during our dinner there, Cecilia pointed out, and I would have noticed creatures like that. Because he wanted to appear normal, I suggested. But now that the ritual is nearly complete, he's not bothering to hide anymore. Or perhaps they only emerge at night, Ava added. Many ritual constructs are sensitive to sunlight. Master, Erebus spoke suddenly in my mind, ask about the basement. Does the mansion have a basement? I asked the woman. Or some kind of underground chamber? She nodded slowly. Yes, that's where I saw him, performing the ritual on Simon. Through a basement window. The entrance is hidden behind a bookcase in his study, I think. I never saw the door itself, but that's where he always went before the screaming started. A heavy silence fell over the cabin. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees with an eerie, mournful sound. The small fire in the hearth cast long, dancing shadows across the walls. Then that's where we'll find him tonight, I decided, standing up despite my fatigue. And that's where we'll end this. Cecilia moved to my side, her hand finding mine. You're exhausted. You need to rest before we go charging into another fight. Her eyes, normally so fierce, now held genuine concern. You killed the enforcer, Arthur. That's not something you just shake off. No time, I replied, though I appreciated her concern. If the enforcer was telling the truth, the ritual happens tonight. We need to stop it before it's complete. I agree with Arthur, Ava said, rising from her chair. But we need a plan. The mansion will be heavily guarded, and we don't know exactly what we're facing. I might be able to help with that, the woman offered hesitantly. I know a way into the mansion grounds that the guards don't patrol. That's how I was able to see what I saw that night. She moved to the table where Ava had spread out a rough map of Windmere. With a charcoal stick, she marked a winding path through the woods that bordered the mansion's western side. There's a small stream that runs under the wall here, she explained, her finger tapping a spot where the property's boundary met the forest. The culvert is just wide enough for a person to crawl through. The guards never check it. I think they don't even know it exists. It will lead you to the gardens, near the service entrance. For the next hour, we refined our strategy. Ava would create a diversion at the front gates, something big enough to draw attention but not so catastrophic as to trigger an immediate lockdown. Meanwhile, Cecilia and I would slip in through the culvert, locate the hidden entrance to the basement, and stop the ritual and deal with the mayor. But as Ava pointed out, things rarely went according to plan. If we get separated, she said, marking rally points on the map, we meet back here at the edge of the woods. If any of us aren't out by dawn, the others don't wait. They go for help. What are we really walking into? Cecilia asked quietly, joining me by the cabin's single window. This feels bigger than a corrupt mayor. It is, I admitted. The enforcer hinted that the mayor serves something else. Something that's about to awaken through this ritual. Like what? A shadow seeker. Maybe, I said, though Erebus's troubled silence suggested something even worse. Whatever it is, we stop it tonight. I checked my weapons one last time. Evolvus at my hip, a silver dagger Ava had provided in my boot, a pouch of spell components secured to my belt. Cecilia was similarly equipped, her curved blade gleaming with freshly applied fire runes. Ava had prepared several explosive devices of her own design, small enough to hide in her palms but powerful enough to bring down a wall if needed. The moon was rising as we left the cabin, casting silver light over the silent forest. The woman stayed behind at our insistence. She'd helped enough already, and we wouldn't risk her life further. Good luck, she said softly as we departed. And, thank you. Whatever happens, Thank you for trying. Her words followed us into the night, a reminder of what was at stake. Not just our lives, but the freedom of an entire town that had suffered under the mayor's twisted rule for generations. Let's end this, I said to my companions as we moved through the moonlit forest toward the mansion on the hill. Tonight, Windmere breaks its chains. Chapter 428. Windmere, 7. Night had fully descended on Windmere by the time we approached the mayor's mansion. Under the moonlight, the ornate building looked more like a fortress than a home, its windows glowing with an unnatural light that spilled onto the manicured grounds. Guards at all entrances, Ava murmured, crouching beside me in the shadows of the treeline. More than before. They're expecting us, Cecilia added, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Word of your fight with the enforcer must have spread. I nodded, studying the patrol patterns. At least a dozen guards circled the property, each moving with the practiced precision of trained security. Not a threat to integration rankers individually, but their numbers would slow us down. Remember the plan, I said quietly. Ava creates a distraction at the east gate. Cecilia and I slip in through the hidden path to the west. We find the mayor, end this nightmare. Ava checked her watch. It's almost midnight. Let's move before they strengthen their defenses even more. She nodded once, then disappeared into the darkness with silent efficiency. Cecilia and I moved in the opposite direction, following the path the woman from the brothel had described, a narrow game trail that wound through dense undergrowth toward the western side of the property. We reached the edge of the woods just as a massive explosion rocked the eastern gate. Flames licked skyward, and shouts of alarm echoed across the grounds. Guards abandoned their posts, rushing toward the chaos. That's our cue, I murmured, impressed as always by Ava's gift for destruction. Ready. Cecilia grinned, wild excitement dancing in her eyes. Born ready. She squeezed my hand quickly. Stay close to me, okay? We sprinted across the open lawn, staying low and fast. The mayor's study window was exactly where the woman had described. On the first floor, partially hidden by ornamental bushes, its curtains drawn but light visible from within. Cecilia kept watch while I worked the window latch, eventually resorting to a focused pulse of mana that shattered the lock. The window swung open, revealing a lavishly decorated office. Empty, thankfully. I slipped through the opening, helping Cecilia in after me. The office was immaculate, every book perfectly aligned on its shelf, every paper neatly stacked. The only sign of disorder was a half-empty glass of wine on the desk, as if its owner had been interrupted. Quite the control freak, Cecilia whispered, eyeing the obsessively organized room. Even his pens are arranged by size. Not surprising, considering how he runs this town, I replied, moving toward the door. The hallway beyond was silent, but I could hear muffled voices coming from somewhere deeper in the mansion. We moved cautiously through dimly lit corridors, past displays of wealth that seemed obscene compared to the modest homes of Windmere's citizens. Paintings that belonged in museums, sculptures that must have cost fortunes, all collected by a man who ruled through fear and ritual sacrifice. The voices grew louder as we approached what appeared to be the main hall. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to make out the words. Cannot be interrupted, the mayor was saying, his voice tight with anger. After all our work, all our sacrifices, we are too close to completion. Yes, sir, replied a voice I didn't recognize. The preparations are nearly complete. See that they are, the mayor snapped. I won't have some academy students interfering with plans decades in the making, and find out what happened to my enforcer. He should have returned by now. I glanced at Cecilia, who nodded grimly. No time for subtlety. I kicked the doors open, Evolvus blazing to life in my hand as we burst into the hall beyond. The scene before us was not what I expected. Rather than a ritual chamber or some den of horrors, we found ourselves in a grand entrance hall. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, and a sweeping staircase led to the upper floors. The mayor stood at its base, dressed impeccably in a dark suit, surrounded by several robed figures who scattered at our sudden entrance. "Ah," the mayor said, his gaze darting past us to the doorway as if expecting someone else. "The heroes arrive. But where is the third member of your little band? And where is my enforcer?" "Your enforcer won't be joining us," I replied coldly, advancing with a volvis raised. "It's over. Whatever you've been doing to this town, whatever rituals you've been performing, it ends tonight." A flicker of genuine shock crossed the mayor's face, quickly replaced by a cold rage. "You killed him? You actually managed to kill my enforcer?" "Save the speech," Cecilia cut in, her own sword gleaming in the chandelier light. "We know what you've been doing. Forcing yourself on women. Sacrificing men who resist. Using their deaths to fuel your sick rituals." A flash of annoyance crossed the mayor's face. "Crude, but not entirely inaccurate. Though you missed the larger purpose." His eyes narrowed. "And it seems I've underestimated you both." "Don't care," I replied. "Surrender now or this gets messy." The mayor's smile was thin and dangerous. "It was already messy the moment you killed my enforcer. But no matter. He was merely one tool of many." He raised his hand, and several guards emerged from side doors, weapons drawn. Not integration rankers, but still dangerous in numbers. At the same time, the mayor drew a long ceremonial dagger that gleamed with an unnatural light. "Your choice," I said, activating Lucent Harmony. The familiar sigils lit up along my arms as perfect tranquility settled over me. All 11 elements of mana fell into perfect balance, enhancing my control and perception. The guards attacked in unison, but they were no match for integration rankers. Cecilia and I moved in tandem, my sword and her magic cutting through their formation with devastating efficiency. Within moments, those who hadn't fallen were fleeing in terror. To my surprise, the mayor proved a more formidable opponent. Despite his supposed white rank status, he moved with the speed and precision of someone far more powerful, his dagger leaving trails of miasma as he wielded it with practiced skill. "A cultist," I noted, "an abnormal one to be exact." Cecilia engaged him directly, her spells forcing him onto the defensive. "You're stronger than you look, old man," she taunted, landing a crimson spell that bit into his side. "You have no idea," he replied, his voice suddenly deeper, resonating with power that hadn't been there before. I activated Mythic Body, feeling strength surge through my muscles as my physical form enhanced beyond normal limits. Soul Vision followed, the world slowing around me as my perception sharpened to supernatural levels. Together, Cecilia and I pressed our attack, driving the mayor back. But he was surprisingly resilient, evading our strikes with unnatural agility, his dagger flashing dangerously close to vital points. The Seraphim's embrace activated, sharpening my focus until I could read even the smallest twitch of his muscles, anticipating each move before he made it. The floor beneath my feet trembled. The entire mansion seemed to shudder, as if responding to some great force beneath it. The mayor laughed, a sound devoid of humor or sanity. "Too late. The final phase has begun." Taking advantage of Cecilia's momentary distraction, he drew a dagger at her, scoring a cut across her shoulder. She hissed in pain but didn't falter, retaliating with a magic arrow that would have taken his head if he hadn't ducked at the last second. I circled around, trying to flank him. "Whatever you're planning, it won't work," I called, hoping to distract him from Cecilia. "Your enforcer is dead, and you're next." "My enforcer?" The mayor's smile was chilling. "He was nothing, a tool like the rest of them, replaceable." Our battle intensified as the mansion continued to shake around us. I could feel my energy draining, but I knew I couldn't relent. Not now. With a final surge of power, I drove a Volvis forward, my energy igniting as I released a powerful strike, knocking the dagger from the mayor's hand and forcing him back. He staggered, his guard broken, and in that instant, I struck, driving my blade forward and pinning him against his desk. The mayor's calm facade had shattered. His composed expression was gone, replaced by a look of panic and rage. He glanced at his wrist, pulling his sleeve down, but not before I caught sight of something. A tattoo, briefly visible under the cuff. It was a red sun, circled by dark lines that seemed almost alive, pulsing faintly with mana. Chapter 429. Red Sun 1. I stared at the red sun symbol on the mayor's wrist. The Southern Sea Sun Palace. Like discovering the villain in Chapter 3 of a mystery novel when you've read the entire book before, I knew exactly what this meant, though I had the distinct disadvantage of being the only one present with such foreknowledge. The Southern Sea Sun Palace occupied its own island in the Luthettal Sea, which stretched between the eastern and southern continents like a vast, watery no-man's land. It was the southern counterpart to the Northern Sea Ice Palace, which had its own island between the eastern and northern continents. Geographical symmetry that would have been poetic if it weren't for the troubling implications. While Mount Huasect maintained a certain aloofness from worldly affairs, their isolation was practically gregarious compared to the Southern Sea Sun Palace. The palace had effectively excised itself from the world in the latter part of the 19th century, creating a bubble of existence so separate that even mentioning them in most circles would earn you blank stares or dismissive laughs. They were the geopolitical equivalent of that distant relative no one talks about anymore, except this relative had access to extraordinary power and a legendary artifact. Arya, I called out, my voice cutting through the tense silence. You recognize this, right? Arya's eyes widened as they fixed on the symbol, her recognition immediate and visceral. Her usual composure slipped for a moment, and I could feel her fire mana simmering just beneath the surface of her control, threatening to ignite the very air around us. The red sun, she confirmed, her tone carrying the weight of centuries of familial grievance. If hatred could be distilled into sound, her voice would have been its purest expression. What is that? Cecilia asked, her crimson eyes narrowing with curiosity. Just some rats who ran away, Arya scoffed, the deliberate casualness of her words belied by the white-knuckled grip she maintained on her staff. But they show themselves again? We need to report this. Of course, I agreed, summoning deep dark from the well of shadows within me. The darkness materialized as sleek black chains that wrapped around the mayor with the eager precision of a spider securing its prey. We'll take him with us. The mayor, wisely, had decided that unconsciousness was the better part of valor and remained slumped in the chain's embrace. Why does she hate that so much? Cecilia whispered to me as we began our journey back, her voice low enough that only I could hear. Bad blood, I replied simply. The Gu family and the Southern Sea Sun Palace have very bad blood, though a long time has passed since then. What I didn't add was that in the novel, the Southern Sea Sun Palace had been used by the Red Chalice cult and vampires as a tool, a staging ground for horrors yet to come. By the time the Kagu family emissaries reached the island after the vampires revealed themselves, they found only ruins kept hidden from the world by the Red Sun artifact's power to block all external observation. Even now, satellites orbiting high above could see nothing of what transpired on that island. The Red Sun's power created a perfect blind spot in humanity's vigilance, a darkness hiding in plain sight. In terms of power, the Palace Lord should be immortal rank, I thought, the realization sending a chill down my spine despite the warm night air. The presence of the symbol here, connected to the miasma incidents, could only mean one thing. The corruption had begun. The mayor's involvement suggested the Palace Lord might already have become a cardinal of the Red Chalice cult, with who knew how many other powerful beings gathered on that isolated island. None of this boded well for, well, anyone, really. Our return journey to the academy was mercifully uneventful. The academy's night guard looked appropriately startled when we arrived at the gates with an unconscious town mayor wrapped in shadow chains. But to their credit, they maintained their professionalism. One doesn't work security at a place where teenagers routinely bend the laws of physics without developing a certain immunity to surprise. We need to see Professor Nero immediately, I said, my tone brooking no argument. The guards exchanged glances before one nodded and gestured for us to follow. He's in his office. Late-night research again. Professor Nero, unlike the guards, didn't even look up when we entered his office with our bound captive. He simply marked his place in the book he was reading and sighed with the weariness of someone who had long ago accepted that peace and quiet were luxuries beyond his reach. I assume there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for why you're dragging Windermere's mayor into my office at this hour? He asked, his gaze finally rising to meet ours. He's involved with the miasma incidents, Ava stated flatly. And worse. Show him, I prompted. Arya stepped forward, unceremoniously yanking up the mayor's sleeve to reveal the red sun symbol burned into his skin. The Southern Sea Sun Palace, she said, practically spitting the words. For perhaps the first time since I'd known him, Professor Nero looked genuinely shocked. His composure returned quickly, but that momentary crack in his calm facade spoke volumes about the seriousness of our discovery. I see, he said, his voice carefully controlled as he stood from his desk. This complicates matters. The next few hours passed in a blur of debriefings, explanations, and increasingly high-ranking academy officials being summoned from their beds. By dawn, we had repeated our account so many times that the words had lost all meaning, becoming simply sounds strung together in familiar patterns. The mayor had been taken to a secure holding facility, his unconscious form still bound in my shadows. Whatever information he held would be extracted, hopefully through questioning rather than more invasive means, though I had my doubts. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the academy grounds, Professor Nero gathered us in a quiet conference room, away from the continuing flurry of activity. You've done well, he said, his expression grave despite the praise. What you've uncovered may have far-reaching implications beyond Windermere. What happens now? Rachel asked, voicing the question we were all thinking. Nero's gaze swept across our faces, lingering on mine for just a moment longer than the others. The headmaster is in communication with Starcrest Academy and the various authorities. This situation requires closer investigation. We're going there, aren't we? I said quietly, the words more statement than question. Nero nodded slowly. A joint delegation is being organized. All 200 exchange students from both Mythos and Starcrest will be dispatched to the Southern Sea Sun Palace for a formal investigation. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. 200 students, sent to an isolated stronghold that might already be corrupted by forces beyond our understanding. It sounded less like a mission and more like the setup for a tragedy. But then, I'd always known this was coming. The pages of this particular story had been written long before I ever arrived on the scene. The only question now was whether I could change the ending before it was too late. When do we leave? Cecilia asked, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Nero's reply was simple, definitive, and carried the weight of finality. Tomorrow. Chapter 430. Red Sun, 2. Magnus Dracar, the martial king, sat with the relaxed posture of someone who had long ago transcended concerns about proper meeting etiquette. The air around him seemed to vibrate faintly, as though reality itself recognized that it was in the presence of someone who could rearrange its fundamental laws if the mood struck him. So, did you confirm what Arthur said? Magnus asked, his deep voice filling the room with a quiet authority that made even the dust motes in the sunbeams seem to pause their dance. Moyong Jong, standing by the window with his characteristic rigidity, let out a sigh that carried the weight of centuries of familial responsibility. The light streaming through the glass outlined his stern profile, casting half his face in shadow as if to emphasize the duality of the decision before them. Yes, it lines up perfectly with our intelligence, he confirmed, his fingers tapping a rhythm of agitation against his forearm. The Southern Sea Sun Palace is indeed connected to the miasma incidents across the border towns. If they're really stirring trouble on this scale, we need to address it before things spiral beyond containment. The question is, how many forces will we need to mobilize? Li Zenith, the lightning dragon of Mount Hua, looked up from the detailed maps spread across the table. His silver hair caught the light as he moved, creating the momentary illusion of an electrical discharge around his head. The Southern Sea Sun Palace has maintained absolute isolation for over a century, he said, his voice carrying the precise sharpness of a master swordsman. Their forces are an unknown quantity, but we must assume they've maintained at least some of their historical strength and whatever forces the cult behind them gives them. Which was considerable, added Nero Estrellan, his academic robes rustling as he leaned forward. Before their isolation, they were known to field at least a dozen ascendant rankers and potentially an immortal rank lord. My research suggests their numbers may have dwindled during isolation, but their quality likely remains formidable. Magnus leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk playing on his lips as he surveyed the concerned faces around him. Not to diminish the gravity of the situation, he said, but I think we're overestimating the mobilization needed. They've already got an immortal ranker and 3 ascendant rankers on their roster, professors no less. Throw in another immortal ranker and a few ascendant rankers for backup, and that's more than enough. Zhang folded his arms, a skeptical brow arched high enough to suggest it was attempting to escape his forehead entirely. You're not wrong in terms of raw power calculation, he conceded reluctantly, but that assumes they don't face anything unexpected. The Southern Sea Sun Palace was known for its cunning as much as its strength. Are you going to sit this one out? Magnus chuckled, the sound low and confident, like distant thunder promising a storm that would reshape landscapes. Not a chance. I didn't come all the way here to watch from the sidelines. Then why bother sending so many? Zhang pressed, his practical nature clearly wrestling with what seemed to him an unnecessary allocation of resources. You alone could probably wipe out the entire Southern Sea Sun Palace if it came to that. There's strategy in numbers, Lee Zenith said, tracing a finger along the island's coastline on the map. A distributed approach allows us to cover more ground in less time. The palace's island is vast. Nearly 10,000 square kilometers of territory to search. Magnus' grin widened, the kind of grin that made people wonder if he was serious or simply baiting them into a false sense of security. And let's not forget, what if they've got a radiant ranker tucked away, hiding in the shadows? You never know. Zhang shot him a flat look that could have dried a rainforest. A radiant ranker? On that island? If they had one, the whole world would have heard by now. Radiant rankers aren't exactly known for their subtlety or restraint. His gaze flickered meaningfully toward Magnus as he said this. I'm hurt, Magnus replied, placing a hand over his heart in mock offense. I'm the very definition of restraint. You once redrew the coastline of the northern continent because someone insulted your sword technique. Nero reminded him dryly. It was a very good technique, Magnus defended, completely unrepentant. Lee suggested. A dual-purpose mission. Publicly, a cultural exchange. Privately, an investigation. It gives us flexibility and multiple avenues of approach. The composition of our forces needs to be carefully considered, Lee continued, his fingers drumming against the hilt of his sword, a habit he had never quite broken. I suggest we lead with diplomacy, a formal request to investigate the connections between the palace and the miasma incidents. Only if they refuse do we escalate. Agreed, Nero nodded. But we should prepare for that escalation from the outset. I'll accompany the students, along with Lee. Our presence should be sufficient to handle most threats, while still appearing respectful rather than provocative. Magnus leaned forward, his arms crossed over the table as his expression shifted from amusement to firm, unwavering confidence. This isn't just about the mission, he said, his voice dropping to a pitch that seemed to resonate directly with the bones of everyone present. It's about experience. These students need to learn what it means to face real threats, to stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's best. And with all the firepower we're bringing, this is the safest way for them to do it. A crucible, Lee murmured, nodding slowly. The future defenders of humanity forged in the heat of genuine danger, yet protected by our presence. I dislike using students as bait, Zhang said, turning away from the window as his expression darkened. Even with supervision, this is a risk. Are you certain it's wise? What if something goes wrong? Then we adapt, Lee replied simply, as we've always done. Nothing will go wrong, Magnus said with absolute conviction. Every one of these kids has reached at least mid-silver rank. A good number are white rank, and there are several already at integration rank. They'll have the support of multiple ascendant rankers, 2 immortal rankers, and me, the strongest in the world. He stated this last part not as boast but as simple fact, like observing that water is wet or gravity pulls downward. We'll organize them into tactical units, Nero suggested, warming to the plan. Each led by an experienced fighter, with a balanced composition of combat specialists and support mages. That structure offers both security and practical field experience. Zhang's worry didn't entirely fade, but he nodded slowly, the logic of their arguments wearing down his resistance. Fine, he said, though his tone remained reluctant. But if it starts going sideways, I hope you're ready to step in. We can't afford to lose anyone, Magnus. Not a single student. Magnus' gaze was steady, his voice quiet but resolute. Don't worry, I've got this. When do we depart? Lee asked, already mentally preparing for the journey. 3 days, Nero replied after a moment's calculation. That gives us time to prepare the students, gather supplies, and arrange transportation. The Luthadal Sea isn't easily crossed, and we can't use teleportation gates directly to the island. Their isolation protocols would prevent it. We'll need water-capable transport, Zhang noted. The nanomaterial buses can be reconfigured for sea travel, but the journey will still take at least a day once we reach the coast. I'll inform the students tonight, Lee decided. They'll need time to prepare themselves mentally as well as physically. The room fell silent once more as the weight of what they were undertaking settled over them all. 200 students, backed by some of the most powerful individuals on the planet, preparing to confront an isolated power with unknown capabilities and suspicious connections. As they rose to leave, Magnus remained seated, his gaze distant as if seeing beyond the walls around them to some future only he could perceive. Magnus, Zhang prompted, pausing at the doorway. The Martial King's